Right, good morning folks. This is my next update regarding my Prusa Mendel build. What you see in front of you is indeed the Arduino clone, the Mega 2560. I'll have a little closer look at here. I haven't really familiarised myself yet with the circuit, but you know, you've got some pin headers here, up here as well, some capacitors, a few other components on the board there, some resistors, transistors, and as I said before, a USB socket and a jack socket. Now, I wasn't sure how I was going to mount this board onto the printer, but I've seen a few different scenarios or techniques on YouTube and the like, other websites and other resources regarding rep wrap. A lot of people just leave it loose, but I don't like that. It's just asking for something to get trodden on or knocked off a shelf or whatever. So I wanted it fixed in place on the printer, and this is what I've come up with for the time being anyway. I mentioned in one of my previous videos that I would quite like to have the power supply and the electronics mounted underneath the hot bed or the hot plate, so it's all out of the way and out of sight. But just for convenience at the moment, I'm going to have it mounted on the front of the machine. So what I've done here is I've got a bit of another bit of laminate flooring, which I've cut down to size, and I've drilled 8 holes in it for this end and for that end for these motor couplings. These brackets, these white plastic brackets, are originally intended for coupling the Z-axis to the shaft on your stepper motors, but I've got a couple spare, so I thought I would use them to attach this board to the threaded rod on the frame. So I'll show you that later once I've got it installed. My next problem was, how was I going to attach the PCB to the laminate. Now, you'll maybe not see it very clearly now, but there is small holes in the PCB for mounting purposes. There's about 6, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, but they're only 3mm in diameter, okay, and in general they've all got a little bit of clearance around them. That one's quite tight, however, and there's very little clearance around that one. So I didn't want, what would you use? A bolt, a nut, or a screw and a nut. It didn't seem like a very viable option. I thought about little plastic pins that would spring out when you push the board onto it. There's those little clips. I've seen them before for like cable tidies. They just push into a hole on a computer case, for instance, and then they spring open at the back of the casing. But I didn't have anything like that available, and I was speaking to a chap on the Rep Wrap channel on IRC, and he came up with an ingenious little solution. Now, yeah, we're all familiar with zip ties, but what I've done here is I've used 2 zip ties per hole. So it's not a big deal, it's just, but I thought it was quite a neat solution to the problem. Basically, one zip tie goes through, okay, and instead of having it doubling back on itself and then going through the head or the tie, which wouldn't be very convenient, because in some cases, you know, you can do it here on the edges, but you wouldn't be able to achieve that on the central holes because of the other header sockets here. Yeah, so it wasn't going to be a viable method doing it that way. So all that we've done is we've pushed the zip tie through and then used a second zip tie to slide up the first and tighten up on it, and then just cut all the extra off. Neat and tidy, you know, or simple and tidy rather. So the other thing or issue I was concerned about was vibration. I didn't want the printed circuit vibrating on the laminate, because the laminate's quite hard and, you know, it could lead to cracking or damage to the circuit. The reason I was so concerned is that, I don't know if we'll see with the light, but underneath the USB socket there are pins which are then twisted to retain the USB socket on the board and give it some strength. Now they protrude further from the PCB than any of the soldered pins do. So that meant that the PCB wouldn't sit flat, it was rocking. So I wanted a method to relieve that. So what I got was, I got a kitchen sponge. You know, it's got a sponge on one side and your Scotch-Brite pad on the other, and I just cut a thin slice off with a sharp knife. Cuts quite readily. I was quite surprised at how easily this stuff cuts. So that's just there to give it a little bit of cushioning, and it's sitting there now, quite secure. There's no movement. Well, if you push hard, there's a little bit of movement, but it doesn't rattle, you know. So that's that. Now this here now is what I referred to in my previous video as the shield. I think they call it a shield just simply because it sits on top. You've got all your headers there. The soldering seems to be reasonable. I'm not a great judge of good soldering, however, you know, but there's certainly, there doesn't seem to be any issues of shorts on the board as far as I can see. You know, it's all quite decent by my mind anyway. There may be a little bit in there, you know, it's not quite as neat in some of these places, but I think it's certainly more than satisfactory for my needs. So that just simply slots in on top, and I'll not push it down, but you just sort of push it down firmly. So I need to basically find out about this now, but this whole assembly now will simply fix to the top of my printer and sit in that sort of orientation. In time, maybe I might have enough room here for a little LCD display, possibly. I don't know if that's going to be an option or not, but that's more money again. One of the things I was working on last night was the motor couplings. You know, I've I've still got to fix the motor coupling to the, not the motor coupling, but the stepper motors to the Z-axis shafts using these motor couplings. So I've got to source a little bit of PVC tubing to maybe help take up the or to fill in the hole somewhat, because it's not quite tightening up. The larger diameter is tightening up quite nicely on the threaded bar, but the smaller is not tight enough on the stepper motor shaft. So I need to resolve that yet. So that's all for now, folks. I'll see you soon. Bye for now. Okay, so I've just mounted the board onto the printer. That's where I think I'll leave it for the time being. In time I might move it onto the back possibly, but for the moment I think it'll do there. So I'm still trying to determine the best place for these components. I'm thinking all the wires coming out the back here or the side. The power supply, I still haven't converted a PC's PSU to, well, don't need to convert it, but I need to alter it. I need to alter a PSU for use on the Prusa Mendel here, so that'll come in time. And the other small item I've done recently is or these. I think that's the wrong one. That goes on the right hand side. I think this one goes on the left here. Yeah, that's more like sense. No, that's wrong. That goes on the right, and this one goes on the left. Right, okay. These fit in like so. And that needs to be coupled up here at the top to the motor. Now, oh shit. Simply rotating that thread bar now drives the bracket. There's a nut on the top here, and there's also a nut on the underside. And the rotation of the shaft simply drives the whole assembly up and down, which gives you your height adjustment, obviously. So that'll be my next stage, getting this coupled up, getting the electrics on, getting the power supply in. So I'm getting towards the interesting part of the build now, so I'm going to crack on with that right now, and I'll see you all again soon. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found it interesting.